She woke up in a cold, sterile room. Her head throbbed, and her mind felt blank, as if a veil had been drawn over the past. She opened her eyes slowly, blinking against the harsh light. Her name Emily came to her mind, but nothing else did. Not the reason she was here, not the people in her life, not even the face in the mirror. Just Emily. A nurse entered the room, her footsteps light, almost cautious. "How are you feeling, Emily?" I don't know," she replied, her voice hoarse. "Where am I?" The nurse hesitated, looking at her with something close to sympathy. "You're at the hospital. You've been in an accident." Emily's heart raced. Accident? She couldn't remember any of it. The nurse handed her a small envelope. "This was in your bag," she said gently. Emily took it, her fingers trembling as she opened it. Inside, there was a single note. "Don't forget who you are." Emily stared at the note in her hand, the words echoing in her mind. "Don't forget who you are." It was simple, but it made her feel something deep inside. Something she couldn't quite place. She folded the paper carefully and tucked it into her pocket, unsure of what to do next. As the nurse left the room, Emily's gaze wandered around the sterile space. The walls were white. The bed she lay on was too clean, too cold. Her heart sank, as if she didn't belong here. Her thoughts were interrupted when she noticed something tucked under her pillow. A small envelope, worn and slightly creased, just like the one she'd received earlier. Her fingers shook as she opened it. This time, the letter inside was longer. The handwriting seemed familiar, but there was something unsettling about it, like a voice she couldn't remember. The words on the page were more complex, harder to understand. Yet she felt an inexplicable urge to read on. "You may not remember this, but you will. The past is not gone. It's only waiting to be found." After reading the letter, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. The words on the page didn't make her feel any closer to the past. Instead, they left her with more questions. Who had written them? And why had they left such a cryptic message? Determined to find answers, she asked the nurse for her belongings. Her bag, her phone, everything she could gather that might help her remember. The nurse reluctantly handed over the items, her eyes filled with concern. With trembling hands, Emily sifted through the contents of her bag. There was nothing that stood out, just ordinary things like a wallet, keys, and a few receipts. But then, she found it. A photograph tucked away in a small compartment. It was a picture of a park with a bench under a tree. She couldn't remember being there, but the place felt oddly familiar. She needed to see it for herself. There had to be something there. Something that would help her piece together the puzzle. The park was just a short walk from the hospital. As Emily arrived, the familiar scent of fresh grass and the sound of birds chirping filled the air. She walked slowly, scanning the surroundings, searching for any clue that could spark a memory. She finally reached the bench from the photo, her heart racing. The tree above was old, its branches heavy with leaves. It looked exactly like the picture. She sat down on the bench, feeling a strange sense of peace wash over her, but still no memories surfaced. Just as she was about to leave, she noticed something underneath the bench. Another letter. Her hands shook as she pulled it out and read the message inside. "This place holds the key to who you are. You've been here before, and you will come back. Trust in yourself, and you will remember." The words were comforting, yet they also carried a weight of expectation. Who had left these letters for her? And what did they mean? Emily closed her eyes, breathing deeply. For the first time since waking up, she felt a glimmer of hope. Emily returned to the hospital with the letter in her hand, feeling a mixture of hope and confusion. The words from the letter, "You will remember," kept repeating in her mind. She wasn't sure what to expect, but something told her that the answers she sought were closer than she thought. The next morning, as she sat in the hospital's waiting area, a woman approached her. Emily looked up, and a wave of recognition swept over her, though she couldn't place the face. The woman smiled gently. "Emily," she said softly, "I'm Sarah. We've known each other for years." Emily felt a flutter in her chest. She wanted to remember. She needed to remember. But no matter how hard she tried, the connection wasn't there. Sarah seemed familiar, like a part of her life she had lost. I'm sorry," Emily said, her voice trembling. "I don't remember you." Sarah's expression softened and she sat beside Emily. "It's okay. You're recovering, and that's what matters. But I want you to know we've been through a lot together. You and I, there's a lot you still don't remember. But you will. You're strong." Emily nodded, still unsure of what to make of this encounter. As Sarah spoke, she felt a deep sense of longing, like a part of her was slowly starting to piece itself back together. The days that followed were filled with fragments, small flashes of moments, like broken pieces of a puzzle that didn't quite fit together. Emily spent more time with Sarah, who patiently told her stories about their past. Some of the stories felt like they belonged to someone else, while others struck a chord deep within her. Still, she couldn't fully remember. One evening, as Sarah left to grab some coffee, Emily sat alone in her room. Her thoughts were a whirlwind, and she found herself staring at the window. Outside, the sky was turning pink with the setting sun. She closed her eyes, trying to quiet the storm in her mind. Suddenly, an image flashed before her eyes. A small cafe, with a table for two by the window. She could almost feel the warmth of the coffee cup in her hands, the taste of something sweet lingering on her tongue. She wasn't sure when it had happened, but the memory felt real. Real enough that she could almost hear Sarah laughing beside her, the sound of their voices blending with the noise of the cafe. When Sarah returned, Emily rushed to her, almost breathless. "I remember the cafe," she said, her voice trembling. "We were there, together." Sarah smiled, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Yes, we were, and you'll remember more soon. Trust me." Emily could feel the weight of the past pulling at her, like a shadow that was always just out of reach. The memory of the cafe lingered in her mind, but there was still so much she couldn't grasp. She needed more clues, more pieces of the puzzle. And then, one day, she found it. While sorting through some of her belongings in her hospital room, Emily came across a thick, leather-bound notebook. It wasn't something she recognized, but the moment she opened it, her heart skipped a beat. The pages were filled with neat, flowing handwriting, her handwriting. The letters she had been receiving made so much more sense now. This was her past, her thoughts, her life. She began to read, each word unlocking new fragments of her memories. She read about the accident, how it had left her with a blank slate, wiping away everything she had once known. She read about her hopes, her dreams, and her fears. And then, she found the part that made her breath catch in her throat. "You will forget for a while, but you mustn't despair. Your memories will return, piece by piece. You just have to believe in yourself." The realization hit her like a wave. She wasn't alone in this. She had written these words for herself, guiding herself back to the person she was meant to be. As Emily closed the notebook, the weight of its contents settled in her heart. She wasn't the same person she had been before the accident, but that didn't mean she couldn't rebuild. She had the strength within her to move forward, even if the road ahead was still uncertain. Days passed and Emily began to feel more like herself. The pieces of her past were falling into place, one by one. The letters, the notebook, the memories. They were all part of her journey. And now, she could look at them without fear. She was learning to trust herself again. Sarah visited her every day, offering words of encouragement and support. But this time, when Emily saw her, she didn't feel lost anymore. She was starting to understand who she was and who she had been. The gap between the past and the present was closing, and Emily felt a deep sense of peace that she hadn't known in months. As she stood by the window one morning, watching the sun rise over the horizon, Emily felt ready for whatever came next. The past had shaped her, but it didn't define her. She was more than the sum of her memories. The future is a new story, she thought, smiling softly to herself.